Oh, what's up everybody? I'm Matt Gary, and on this episode of Coding with the Force, I'm going to show you how to set up a simple CI/CD pipeline for your Salesforce environment using CircleCI and GitHub. Alright guys, so just like with every other video I make, I want to first explain to you why you would care to set up a CI/CD pipeline using CircleCI and GitHub. Number one, nobody's paying me to suggest these products, as if they would. I don't have very many of you following me at the moment, although I'm very grateful to all of you that do. I chose these because they're both FedRAMPed products, or can be FedRAMPed products, so they can work for virtually anyone. They're relatively easy to set up. There's good documentation for them, and it's what it's what I know the best at the moment. Also, they're relatively inexpensive compared to a lot of options that you have. So, if you can afford to go the Flowsum, Copato, Gearset route, fun, wonderful. But they are very expensive, and some of them are nowhere near as configurable as, rolling your own solution here. The second thing I want to go over is this is a very simple solution. You will need to expand upon this for your own implementation, most likely. This will definitely get you what I'm going to show you will get you groundwork, and as the groundwork laid out for your CI/CD pipeline that you might be wanting to build for your Salesforce instance. But it's not 100% of the way there. I do plan to do subsequent videos covering more specific aspects of CI/CD pipelines with Salesforce, and branching techniques, DevOps related stuff, all that kind of stuff. I don't know when I'll get to it, but I promise I will pretty soon. And why would you care to have this? For so many reasons. Number one, your developers will love you, and your business people will love you if you take the time to build these CI/CD pipelines and really start down the road to kind of automating your deployments a whole lot more. And I say that because one of the most overlooked things in Salesforce, unfortunately, is CI/CD. So continuous integration and continuous deployment. If you don't know what those stand for, or I guess continuous delivery, some people call it that. I honestly don't know what the difference is. I'm not some kind of wonderful guru or something, but let me explain to you why you would care to do CI/CD work. The reason that you would is, say you're in a 10-year-old org or something, or hopefully you're not, but theoretically you're in a 10-year-old org, and in your 10-year-old org, whenever you started, maybe you've been around the whole 10 years, and in year one, whenever you started, you could deploy things really quick. You could deploy things in a few days. You could build something and deploy it, and build and deploy, and you'd build these massive things in almost no time. But then you got into year 2 or 3 or 4, and things started to slow down, and it takes you 4 weeks to deploy anything. Even the smallest change. So you want to maybe add one little thing to the contact trigger or something, and you can't because you've got to do all of this regression testing, and you've got to sift through this, contact trigger code to figure out what the hell it's doing. among other things. So something that could and really should take 30 minutes to develop and deploy takes you 3 or 4 weeks, because you have nothing that's automatic that you can trust to test that code, and you have nothing that's automatically reviewing that code, among other things. So, you end up having to do a lot of manual stuff that is a real gigantic pain. So long story short, if you go down this route for CI/CD, and you take the time to not only build the pipeline that I'm kind of going to lay the groundwork for you here in just a moment, but to write the tests necessary to get this done, or to be able to trust that when you deploy things that there are not going to be any problems all the way up the chain, everybody's going to love life a whole lot more. I promise you that. It's worth it if you decide to do it. It's really a wonderful thing. So anyway, let's get to it. I'm doing this because it's undervalued, and I'm tired of going everywhere and not seeing it and struggling for a long time to get it implemented. So hopefully this kind of maybe jump starts things. Maybe not, but we'll see. All right, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is for this CI/CD pipeline that we're going to set up is you're going to want to set up a GitHub account if you don't have one. If you do, great. And the next thing you'll want to do after you set up a GitHub account is go to create a new repository. So we'll create this repository, and I'll probably make my 35th CircleCI demo repository. CircleCI demo repo. Cool. And I'm not going to put a description, but you should really consider it, and we'll create this repo. All right. So then the next thing that we'll do is copy this URL here, because we're going to care about it in just a moment. And we're going to come over here to our Visual Studio Code and do a few things. All right, so I've already got a lot of these things set up, but I'll go through the commands that you would care about. The first thing that you're going to want to do, if you've never worked with a repo-based model for Salesforce development, this might be a little confusing to you, but I promise it's not that crazy. What you will do is in Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ, if you're me and you actually love IntelliJ, but you only use Visual Studio Code for these videos because most people use Visual Studio Code. I'm not going to get into it. I love IntelliJ and Illuminated Cloud too. Check it out. Got a video for it. Also have a video for how to set up Visual Studio Code if you're confused and you've never done that before. But first things first, once you set up your Visual Studio Code project, you're going to then want to pull in all of the relevant code and configuration that you care about, and you would want to go into your repository in GitHub, right? Because it's kind of going to be your source of truth for your whatever sandbox or Scratch org or whatever you're working in going forward. So you'll pull all that stuff in. Again, if you don't know how to do that, I have a video covering it. It'll be pretty easy. The next thing that you're going to do is if you come over here the first time in Visual Studio Code, if you click on this, this is the source control button. It'll allow you to initialize a Git repository. Alternatively, whoa, new terminal. Okay, alternatively, you could say Git init down here in the terminal window. Now, I've already initialized my repository, so that won't work for me, but it will work for you if you haven't done so. And once you have initialized your repository, you'll see a whole list of things up here, and you'll be able to commit them using either the interface that Visual Studio Code gives you here, where you can press this plus button to commit your changes, or you can come down here and do git add period, space period, and that'll basically add all of the files that you care about to your change list for your commit that you're going to do here in just a moment. I'll go over that in a minute. Okay, so after you add everything that you care about, and I will we'll just do this one more time. I'll add this to the list. Okay, so next thing, after you've added everything you care about, the next thing that you'll want to do is commit that to your local Git repository. If you're not familiar with Git, you know, you should be familiar because it's a wonderful thing that will save you when you screw up or screw yourself. There are probably hundreds of times I would have crashed and burned and everyone would have hated me if I hadn't used my GitHub or my local Git repository. You do not have to use GitHub or anything else to be able to use a local Git repository. You just have to download and install Git. So that is an important point that I failed to bring up, but if you don't have Git installed on your desktop, you need it, and I'm sorry you haven't been using it so far, but you should. Other things that you'll need are the Salesforce CLI, as well as OpenSSL, which I'll show you why you need OpenSSL, which will allow you to create your own free SSL certs for your you know, whatever you need them for, which is great because they normally cost money or can cost quite a bit of money. So and I'll show you how to use that and give you a little executable that I didn't technically write, although I modified it a bit to work with Windows a little better, PowerShell specifically. Anyway, we're getting off topic. So we've added all of these changes at this point to they're staged to be committed to our local Git repository. So we do git commit -m and we'll do, you know, you can do something like initial commit for your first time, right? And then it'll add all your files and it'll commit those to your local repository. And then with that with this GitHub repo that we just made, so our remote repository that is hosted on GitHub instead of our local repository that is always hosted on your local machine. Again, we want to copy this URL here and we want to paste it right. Not quite yet, but soon. We'll want to do git remote add origin, and then we will put in that link, and it's going to tell me a remote origin already exists because I am already using a remote origin. But just so you know, or I've already connected to another one, but just so you know, that's how you set it up the first time. And you know, it'll basically say nothing, but if you wanted to see your remote, whether or not your remote was actually set up successfully, you can say git remote show origin, and then what that'll do is it'll list out the repo that you are connected to in GitHub or wherever, Bitbucket potentially, if that's your thing. Okay, and then last but not least, to push your local Git commit that you just did to your remote repository, you say git push u and origin master. Or you could do this as main. These days, they call the main branches main instead of master branches. So that is your choice. The for the one that I currently have set up, it was already set up with master. And so I'm going to go ahead and push it up there. And cool. So my changes will then be pushed into my remote repository. I'm going to go on ahead and switch back to the repo that I'm actually using currently. I don't want to undo everything. So see, where was it? This one. So this is the one I've already pre-built for this. But basically, what I just showed you will be able to get you up and running in your own new remote repo on GitHub. Okay, cool. So once you've got a remote repo set up for you in GitHub, you need to obviously link that repo to CircleCI somehow. And this is pretty easy to do. I am going to sign out so you can see this from start to finish, hopefully. So if you go to CircleCI.com and you click Go to App up here in the top, it'll ask you to log in with GitHub or Bitbucket. So obviously I'm going to use GitHub. You're welcome to use Bitbucket if that is your preferred option. And you will initially land on this page with called Projects. And you'll see all of my repositories. So here's the one that I currently have linked and running and is doing cool things that we're going to be working with. But this is the one that I literally just set up just a moment ago to kind of demo to you how to get all of your code into a remote GitHub repository. And if I wanted to, I could click Setup Project. And in that project, I can add a configuration file. So I'll show you that real quick. Cool. Basically what that did is it committed a CircleCI folder and a configuration YAML folder to my repo that I just made a little bit ago. So you can see that that instantly made this CircleCI folder. And it made this config YAML file, which you will basically want to completely delete, and we're going to change this quite a bit. But for CircleCI to be connected and to be doing what it needs to do, you do need to create this .circleci folder and a configuration YAML file. Now, let's go back to the project I had all set up for this already, and go over what a simple, configuration YAML file looks like in or for CircleCI. So as you can see, that was really easy to get those linked up. That took all of 15 seconds. Really not a lot of time at all. And it already ran and validated that it was hooked up to my GitHub repo. So, all right, so here is my configuration YAML file that I've built for my simple implementation that I'm going to show you for this CI/CD setup with CircleCI and GitHub. So if you've never seen YAML before and you're not super comfortable with it, just think of it as a different way to represent XML or JSON or whatever else. That's effectively what it is. And if you're not comfortable with just that simple explanation, I will give you a free, I'm not going to give it to you. I'll give you a link to a free Udemy tutorial that goes over it really well. It's great. So there's not a lot to YAML, but it can be very confusing the first time you use it or look at it or whatever, just like XML or JSON and anything else like that. Okay, so with all of your CircleCI YAML files, you're going to want to declare a version of CircleCI that you're using. So I'm going to use version 2.1. That was at least the most recent version whenever I kind of started trying to figure out how I was ever going to make a video about CircleCI to show to people, or well, CI/CD really. So you declare this version up here at the top. It does need to be formatted in a particular way, right? You do have to have version : right next to it, a space, and then the number 2.1 or whatever version it is you want to do it on. And then the next thing that we're going to declare are our jobs. And our jobs are really the most critical things that we set up here in this YAML file. So this first job here is called run tests. You can name these jobs at this level right here whatever you want. So this doesn't have to be run tests. It could be cool test bro, or I'm the test master, or your mom's a test, or something like that. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. You can name this whatever you want. So your jobs are whatever you want to name them. And you reference these later in workflows, which we'll get to in a minute. The next thing underneath your job that you've declared here, called run tests, that you need to declare is the Docker image that you want to use. Now, if you've never heard of Docker, it's a whole deal. But let me simplify it into the easiest thing I could think of. Docker is like spinning up a little virtual machine for a very brief moment in time, with the, stuff that you need for that machine to run whatever it is you're trying to run. So basically what we're saying here is, hey, CircleCI, when you run this run test job, spin up a virtual machine using Docker that has the latest version of Node installed. That's it. There's nothing else to it. Might seem confusing. That's all it is. And you can make your own Docker images. You really don't need to for Salesforce, but I don't know. Maybe there's some really cool complex implementations people can do where they, make their own Docker images and do cool things. So you can create your own Docker image. This is one that CircleCI provides to you. So it's not like I'm getting this from somewhere special. CircleCI just says, okay, you can state that for your Docker image that you want to use for your job, that you want to use our Node Docker image that we already have set up for you. So I didn't set this up somewhere. It's not special. It's just a thing CircleCI has available. The next thing that we are going to declare for our run test job are the steps or the things that are going to happen for when we run this job. So the first thing that we want to do is check out our GitHub branch. So we're going to actually check out our GitHub branch for CircleCI to use and do whatever it is it needs to do. The next thing here is optional, but I think it can speed up things a little bit anyway. You can restore and save your cache. So oftentimes you have a lot of dependencies in your package JSON, and it's nice to just be able to restore that cache and not have to load it in every single time you check out your branch. So it saves you a little bit of time there. Don't worry too much about this. If you don't understand what this is, you do not need to have it. But basically, it's going to store my package JSON in memory within my Docker or within my CircleCI environment. That's all this is saying. And as confusing as it looks. Then we're going to run this install dependencies shell script. So when you do this run action here in your steps, you want to name it, ideally, something useful. So I'm naming this install dependencies. And I have a build folder in my project, my GitHub project, that stores all of these different shell scripts that I wrote. Now you can technically, instead of putting a path to a shell script here for the command that you want to run, just actually write inline shell script commands. But I think that that's messy and weird, and lots of times you use the same shell scripts in multiple jobs, so you it's a lot cleaner in my opinion if you put these in their own shell scripts. I'll put it that way. So we open up the install dependencies. It's pretty simple. Basically, I just kind of echo just means like a print line. So it's going to print that it's installing the Salesforce CLI, and then I'm actually going to globally install the Salesforce CLI so that I can use it in other actions that I take within my steps here for this job. Okay, so I'm running this install dependency shell script, and if you're not familiar with what bash, like bash shell scripting or whatever else, I will put a link in the description of this video for a really good Pluralsight course that goes over shell scripting. If you're not comfortable with it, it's not a super hard thing to learn, but it does take a week's worth of time or so to get decent enough with it to build a pipeline anyway. This command here after this run command is just a save cache command. Same kind of situation as restore cache, except for, if the package JSON doesn't already exist, I'm going to store it, basically. Save it. After that save cache command, I've got another run command here where I'm going to log into the org. So I am going to look in my build folder. So basically this is saying in the build folder, let's run the login to sandbox shell script. So in here, we've got this login to sandbox shell script that I've set up. And this is going to be a little more confusing than the other one, but I'll explain it to you pretty, quick. Another thing, if you don't, if you're not comfortable with it, you should get a little comfortable with the Salesforce CLI. It's not like that crazy of a CLI. It's very, very useful. So, check it out. Waste a few minutes figuring it out because it is more useful for a lot of things, or useful for more things than just, setting up a pipeline, but it's going to make your life a lot easier for pipelines too. So, here we need to start talking about some other interesting things, but I'll just go over the script really quick before we get into those things. So obviously right here I'm just printing that I'm logging into my sandbox org. Then I'm making a directory called keys. I'm storing a sandbox cert key, or echoing the sandbox cert key, base 64 encoding it, and then I'm adding this cert key into the keys folder that I just set up in my little virtual Docker instance for this brief moment in time, and placing my server key there, or placing this sandbox cert key that I base 64 encoded as the server key there. Then I'm authenticating to my sandbox org using this connected app key that I have stored within CircleCI as an environment variable. And I'm going to show you these things in just a second. So sorry it's a little out of order, but it's hard to kind of do this in order, if I'm being honest. And then I'm going to, basically pass it the key that we just encoded and the username for the user that we're going to kind of authenticate in as, and then set the DevHub name, or the name of the alias for the DevHub. Cool. So there's a lot of confusing things in here, and you're like, what do all these little things mean? So let me show you what these different pieces are that you see within this script here. And I know this is all confusing, but just bear with me, or completely ignore me, go to my GitHub and reverse engineer all this yourself, your call. So what is this sandbox cert key? What is this little $sign sandbox cert key? And the same thing for these other $sign sandbox app key, $sign sandbox username. For CircleCI to be able to connect to your Salesforce instance, you need to create a connected app for it. And that connected app needs to use a cert to do verifications between you and CircleCI. So at least that's the only way I've successfully set this up. So if you got another way, you let me know. I'd love to make it easier. So the first thing that we're going to need to do to make this connection between CircleCI and Salesforce work is we're going to need to generate a key. So for this script that we wrote right here to work, we need to generate a cert, basically, that we can use to kind of say, hey, Salesforce, I'm a cool guy, CircleCI is a cool guy, let him interact with the data in your org. So the first thing that we're going to do is run this shell script that will be available to you. I didn't write this shell script. I did modify it a little bit to work a little better with Windows terminal, but nothing crazy. Somebody else did most of the hard work. To run this script, you are going to need OpenSSL installed on your machine. I will put a link in the video to tell it to show you kind of, you know, what you need to do to install that. It's not super hard, but you know, it's yet another thing you need to install. So after you open this shell script up, it's going to prompt you to say, you know, we're going to generate certificates for use with CircleCI. Press the enter button. So press the enter button. It's going to create a server key, which you probably maybe just saw pop up here. And we'll hit continue again. And then we're going to write a, you know, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions. So we'll want a country name, state and province name. We'll say Kansas City, sure. And organization name, so I'm coding with the force. And unit name, we don't care about that. Common name, not really that important. Technically, you don't really even have to put this in either. But I'm going to do it with the force at gmail.com. Boom. Don't need a challenge password. Don't need an optional company name. But don't press enter again after that one, because we do need this key here that gets generated for us. So we need to grab all this, copy it, open up a notepad here. I'm going to delete all this junk, copy this in, and there you go. So there's your cert key. That's step one here. And we'll save that. So you definitely want to save that key that gets generated there. And last but not least, come back over here and hit the enter button. And what that will do is leave you with this server cert file that we're going to need to use here in just a minute within Salesforce. All right, so let's open up Salesforce and get this connected app set up so that CircleCI can communicate with your Salesforce org. So wherever you went, there it is. So then Salesforce will need to set up a connected app. If you've never done that, let me just show you how to do it, because it's pretty easy. You'll log into your org, obviously. You'll go to App Manager. And then, come on. Oh, right, I'm already here, so it's not going to change anything. Anyway, we'll do a new connected app. And you can call this whatever you want, but I'll call it CircleCI Demo. And I'm going to make my contact email the same one that I filled out before, codingwiththeforce@gmail.com. And we need to enable OAuth settings, very important. And I cannot remember what the callback URL is, so I'll look at that in just a second. The next thing that's important is to click this Use Digital Signatures box and choose that cert file that we just made. So server cert. And then you'll need to give access the following OAuth scopes. Manage your data via the API, perform requests on your behalf at any time, and access your data via the web. And callback URL, what are you? This guy. There we go. So you're going to want to put in this localhost 1717. You can also just put in localhost 8080. But, you know, basically if it's not one of those two things, you're going to potentially see errors pop up. So, you know, do one of the two, localhost 1717 OAuth redirect, or you can just do localhost 8080 as well. It seems to work in my experience. So once you've got that done, you will hit save. It'll tell you it takes 2 to 10 minutes to set up your connected app. But while we wait, there is another thing that we need to do. You need to go to Manage on your connected app, Edit Policies, change permitted users to admin approved users are pre-authorized. Hit OK, save, wait for Appy. Scroll down, and then you can choose which profiles or permission sets grant the users access to, you know, run or connect to your org, basically. So I'll just say my system administrators have the ability to do that. And yeah, we're all good to go. Now in 10 minutes after you wait, you should be okay. But let's go back to our connected app, because there is something that we are going to need. Just go to App Manager. Maybe. This is the one I just made, I hope, since I've got a few. And we need to copy this consumer key here. Cool. So, all right, what have we done? We made a connected app. Well, actually, first, we generated a cert using OpenSSL. And that's shell script that I will provide to you. The second thing that we did is we created a connected app, and we, you know, added the server cert that we generated to that connected app. And we gave the appropriate access to that app and gave the appropriate users access to run the app. The next thing that we're going to need to do is go into our, go back into CircleCI, go to whatever your repo is that you care about, and you're going to go into, we'll go into the demo one that I set up at the beginning here. And you'll go to your project settings up here in the top right. And in project settings, you'll see this environment variables thing. And we'll want to add several environment variables. So in my setup here, I have the sandbox cert key named this. So we'll name this sandbox cert key, and that equates to this cert that we generated with OpenSSL earlier, or this cert key that we did earlier. And you'll click Add Environment Variable. The next thing that we care about is our consumer key for our connected app. So come back over here, paste that into the value, and I called this sandbox app key. So there's our second environment variable. And the last thing that we care about is our sandbox username. So this is literally the username of a user in your org that can connect to your managed app. So for me, that's me. And we're going to go back over here, put that value in, and add the environment variable here. Now, do you technically need to do this? No. You could technically have all of this stuff inline here and not use environment variables. So why would you go through the extra hassle to use environment variables? Well, if I leave all that stuff in my GitHub repo and put it up there, and basically what that does is leave my organization open to an attack, right? I've just given you all of the information you need to basically demolish my org, more or less. So, you know, you want to be really careful about that. And these things. Another thing that's really important is I didn't generate this server cert key, or the server cert here within my project, but if I had, then it would show up within my project, and you absolutely do not want to put the server cert in your project in your remote repository in GitHub. You know, locally it's fine, but in your remote repository you definitely do not want that. So make sure you go into your git ignore file and add server.cert or whatever you named it here so that it never syncs up to your remote repository. These are huge security concerns. If you put your server cert up there, people could take advantage of that. If you put these credentials here inline and then you save these to your remote repository, people could find those and take advantage of that. But if you put them in environment variables, you're at least quite a bit more safe. So anyway, that's why we did all that stuff, or that's why we use environment variables anyway. They're now reusable, obviously, through the use of this kind of $ operator and then the name of the variable. And they are also considerably more secure. Okay, cool. So we basically built that little connection between Salesforce and CircleCI now, and now they can kind of talk to each other, which is awesome. So let's get back to the rest of this configuration.yaml, and it won't be all that difficult from here. So the next thing that we have set up is our run Apex test shell script. So I'll open up this shell script. So the last thing that we went over was this log into org shell script here, or log into sandbox shell script. The next one that we're going to go over for this run test job is the actual action where we run our test. So we've installed the Salesforce CLI, we've logged into our Salesforce org, and now we're running our Apex tests in our org. So there's a couple ways to do this. I'll go over this one up here in just a minute. But an easy way to do this, if you're not using Scratch orgs, or you're concerned you're going to use up your Scratch org limit, which is really why I do it this way. Basically what you're going to do is you can use, you'll deploy the source from your GitHub repo. So the Force app folder in your GitHub repo is going to be the source path for your code and configuration. And then it's going to log in to your Salesforce org to deploy this stuff using the DevHub alias that we set up when we do, well, log into sandbox here. So we said we logged into our sandbox and we set up the login alias as DevHub. So we've deployed the source to our org here, and now we're going to test that code in our org using this force apex test run. And we're just going to run local tests instead of all tests because, yeah, I don't want to get too complicated here. You can choose which route you want to go. And it's going to output our test results into this output directory called test results in the tap format. And again, our target username to run these tests, or the user we're going to run these tests as, is the one we authenticated with and are using the DevHub alias. Okay, cool. So that's how that's kind of set up and working. Now we've got another job that we want to run. So we've got this code review job. So we've successfully run our tests. Now we want to do a code review real quick. So we're going to set up another job. Now the jobs are in their own Docker container, so they don't know anything about what job 1 did and all the things it installed and all the things that it went through. They only know about what is relevant in its particular job's, lifespan, I guess. So for this new job called code review, we're going to declare our Docker image again. Our Docker image yet again is the node latest. The steps to take for our code review. So we're going to check out our repo again. We're going to restore our cache if we have one. We're going to install our dependencies, save our cache. This again is the same shell script we just looked at earlier, where we just install the Salesforce CLI globally. Then we're going to run the SFDX scanner, and we're going to store our SFDX scanner results in a CSV. Cool. So let me show you what that SFDX scanner shell file looks like. It's a little more involved than the other ones, kind of. You do have to, so to be able to run the SFDX scanner, you have to have, JDK version 8 or greater installed. So I'm installing OpenJDK here with this line. I am installing the Salesforce Scanner plugin and answering the yes/no question that it forces you to answer when you install this plugin with this line here. And then I'm saying run the Salesforce Scanner on the default folder, so that's this folder in our repository. Put the results in the CSV format and place it in the SFDX scanner analysis CSV file. And then I declare violations cause an error. If you don't put this in here, violations won't cause an error and it won't stop your CircleCI from deploying into production. So if you want this to actually stop a deployment, make sure to add this violations cause an error thing here. And you can make this a lot more specific if you'd like to. There's a lot of options. It's a really great plugin. Pretty cool. All right, so that's all that is. That's what's going to run our SFDX scanner and kind of make things work. And as you could see here, we said our out file was SFDX scanner analysis CSV. And in the configuration YAML, we said store our artifacts in this path. And when we run this here in a minute, a lot of this is going to make maybe a little bit more sense, but we're almost done with this YAML file, which is the biggest thing. So the last job that we're going to declare is our code deployment job. Basically, we're going to set up a Docker image yet again because this is a new job, and this new job is in its own little world that doesn't really know much about the other jobs at all. Basically nothing. And we're going to spin up a CircleCI Docker image again. Going to check out the repository. Going to restore our cache. We're going to run the install dependency script yet again. We're going to save our cache yet again. We're going to log into our org yet again. And then we're going to deploy our code to our org, which that's one shell script we haven't seen yet. So there it is. Basically, what we do here is we're going to convert our code in the ForceApp folder into basically metadata format. That's what this force source convert is. So it's going to be in the format that the metadata API would care about. So we're going to do force source convert, and what this is saying is we're going to put our conversion into a directory that is called deploy code. So we're basically making a directory and placing the conversion here. And it is reading from the forsat file to do the conversion, or forsat folder to do the conversion. So this forsat folder here. And the next thing we're going to do is deploy this code to our org. So we're going to do sfdx, and we're going to do a metadata deploy command here. And we're going to log in using that devhub alias again. So this is saying the user that you want to log in as is your devhub alias. The directory that you want to deploy the code from is this deploy code folder that we made up here, really. And then how long are you willing to wait? -1 minutes means as long as it takes. And then this -L is what test you want to run, and we just want to run local tests. That's simple. Pretty cool. Now that we've gone over this YAML file, all of the jobs that we've made in it, what those jobs mean, a breakdown of kind of what they do, let's look at workflows. So workflows are pretty cool. In CircleCI, you can do quite a lot with them. Much more than I even have shown here. So basically, what workflows do is they determine which jobs run and when and how, more or less. So we're going to declare our workflows. I'm currently using version 2 of workflows. I don't know what it's currently on. It might be a higher number now. But you just declare the version that you're going to use for workflows, and for CircleCI specifically. Then you're going to have this validate here, and then you're going to declare the job order in which you want to run your jobs, basically. So I want to do the run test job first. It's going to be the first one I run here. And then I want to run the code review one, but I don't want the code review to run unless run test goes successfully, finishes successfully. So in that case, I want to put the requires keyword here and have run tests under here. So basically what this is saying is I'm going to run the code review job that I made up here, code review job, in the instance that the run test job is successful and finishes. And that's the same thing here. So I want to run the deploy code job when the code review finishes successfully. Awesome. It's not super complicated. You can also put things in here like branch filters. So say for instance you only want these jobs to run when you deploy to the master branch. You can put a branch filter in there and say only deploy when it's you're committing to the master branch. You can put filters that say all but the master branch. So if you only wanted this to run in your sandbox environments or something, you could do that. Etc., 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 etc. Okay, so we've gone over this YAML file. We've gone over the shell scripts. As you can see, this isn't super difficult. It's maybe confusing, but it's definitely not difficult. You just have to get used to the Salesforce CLI. You have to get used to YAML, and you have to get used to the little unique things about CircleCI and GitHub potentially. These are all skills that are useful to have even if you don't do this, even if you don't want to build CI/CD pipelines and infrastructure. Become an infrastructure dev or whatever. All right, so we've figured out this YAML file. So let's see this whole thing in action. So we've set up our GitHub repo. We've linked CircleCI to it. We've linked Salesforce, or we've set up a connected app in Salesforce so that CircleCI can connect to it. And we have built our shell scripts in our YAML file to do all these jobs in the order that we want them. So let's see all of this together. I'm just going to make one very, very small, simple change to this config YAML file, so I have something to commit to my GitHub repo. And we'll come over here, and I'll just add this. And now that I've added that file as a staged change, I would like to commit this, and if you didn't know, I don't think I explained this earlier, but git commit -m. -m stands for message. You do want to typically put a very useful message every time you commit something in GitHub. Trust me, eventually you'll thank yourself. So you do git commit -message, and we'll just say deployment, or actually we'll say CI/CD demo, and hit enter, and we will push that to our master. And now what we'll see is that over here in GitHub, or sorry, in CircleCI, if we go back to our dashboard, we've got a job running. So our pipeline is running, and you can see it's running this run tests. And so what it did first is it spun up a CircleCI environment based on that Docker image, so that node environment that we did. It checked out our code from GitHub, or from our GitHub repo. It restored our cache from the node modules, which is cool. So it saved a little bit of time maybe. And right now it's installing the Salesforce CLI. So it's going through and setting that up, and this can take, you know, it can take up to a minute to install the Salesforce CLI each time, but you know, not too much longer than that typically. So once it's done installing the Salesforce CLI, then it'll go on ahead and, you know, authenticate into the org and run all those tests and give us a cool output, hopefully. It's taking a hot minute at the moment. I think we're almost done. There we go. And so then it quickly logged into the org, as you can see. It authorized into the org really quickly. It only took a couple seconds, and now it's trying to deploy our source to org and run our Apex tests. So it did successfully deploy everything in our source file, or sorry, in our Force app folder into production, or sorry, our sandbox environment. And then it ran the tests, and it sent test results to this test page. And this is always here, this little test tab. And that's why we, in our YAML file, if you remember, said store our test results in the test results path. And in the event that we didn't have our tests passing, it would indeed, you know, it'd show us our individual errors for each of those tests and the methods that they failed on, etc., etc. Okay, so the run tests passed, which means that code review, that second job we set up that was dependent on run tests passing, can now do its thing. So it did the exact same thing as the last one. It spun up its own Docker environment. It's installing the Salesforce CLI again. Then once it does that, it's going to install the SFDX, or sorry, the Salesforce CLI SFDX scanner plugin, which should happen here in a sec. So it's already doing that. Did it pretty quick and installed the JDK. It's installing the oh, maybe it's finishing installing the JDK. Then it'll install the SFDX scanner and perform an analysis of our code for us. And it's going to fail here because I have some random Apex stock things, and plus I wanted to show you what an artifact looked like for this and how, you know, cool it is, I guess, in my opinion. I don't know. It'll take a minute. Okay, so it failed, which is great, because that means that, you know, our code didn't pass inspection, basically, and it did upload our artifacts as SFDX scanner analysis to this place right here, artifacts. If we click on this, we can grab this guy and take a look at our code errors, or our code violations, really, not necessarily errors. So, you know, it tells us about missing Apex stock comments and validating CRUD permissions and empty block statements, blah, 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 blah. So, pretty cool. and it even kind of gives you links to the PMD rules that it ran to get those things. It also runs ESLint, which is pretty awesome. Okay, so another important thing to note is because code reviewed failed, deploy code didn't happen, didn't run, so our code did not deploy into our production environment. In the event that this had passed, it would have gone to the next step and deployed the code. So it's pretty cool, you know, it's got setting up this stuff. Obviously, this is a very simple implementation. It is literally just the tip of the iceberg here, I guess, if you want to call it that. But, you know, you can, with a simple save command of your code at this point, you can see, number one, has your code broken anything that you didn't anticipate? Because it's going to run all your tests instantly as soon as you, you know, commit to your repository. And then it's going to tell you instantly whether or not your code is, you know, following best practices that are, or, you know, whatever rule set that you care about. It doesn't necessarily have to be the one that I'm leveraging here in my code review, but basically you can run reviews on your code instantly, and it just does a lot of stuff at the click of a button with you not having to worry about stuff. So if you have really great tests, and you have UI testing, so maybe you have jest testing, or you use something like, I'm going to forget the name, some UI testing software, whether it's a Salesforce specific one or it's Selenium or something along those lines. If you have those things that you can run and get test results for them, you can add those in there too. And then all these things, every single time you commit, can run, and if they're successful, go to the next step and the next step and the next step. Obviously, I'm just doing this in a couple of dev environments, so I'm just running this in one dev environment, validating that the tests work, and then if they do, potentially deploying it to another dev environment. But in your dev environment, you could say, okay, if my code is done, I want to commit it to my feature branch, and then if it, you know, passes everything in my feature branch, then I want to automatically go on ahead and deploy it to my integration branch. And if it passes everything in my integration branch, I want to automatically deploy it to QA. And if it automatically passes everything in QA, then I want to automatically deploy it to you know, UAT or something, and then if UAT passes, I want to just go on ahead and deploy it into production. It'll save you an enormous amount of time. But again, this is just the start. You have to dedicate enough time to build out appropriate test classes to be able to run with all this stuff. You have to create a good branching structure for GitHub for, you know, whatever projects you have to you know, make sure you got something that works for your setup. And you know, you have to maintain this pipeline and the tests that you've written going forward. So is it a lot up front? Sure. But as you can see, setting up the pipeline isn't crazy hard. Now it can get a lot more complicated than that, but it's not insane. And if you build a pipeline and you build tests that you trust and that everybody else can trust, then you can code more, you can code faster, and you can get more to your users quicker. So pretty important stuff. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. That's all I got for today. I'll put the code in the GitHub repository so you can check it all out. I'll give you all those links to things so that you can go learn stuff if you want to. I hope this was more helpful than all of the tutorials I could find on it, because they all skim over stuff and don't really go over all the little details, and it bothers me because there were so many little things that I had to figure out to get this done. So if you guys have any questions, please let me know. If you want more Salesforce videos, more DevOps related videos for Salesforce, more development related videos for Salesforce, or even admin ones, because I do those every once in a while too, please make sure to subscribe. And thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.